The little girl's cry echoed through the grand marble courtyard like a broken violin string, sharp and piercing, cutting through the warm afternoon air. She was sprawled on the cold stone floor, her small hands trembling as she tried to push herself up. Tears streamed down her dirt-streaked cheeks, and her fragile voice cracked as she sobbed, "Mommy, I can't walk. Mommy, I can't stand up." Her teddy bear lay beside her, its golden fur collecting dust, its button eyes reflecting the same helplessness she carried in her own. The world seemed to pause for a second. The towering mansion behind her, the well-trimmed hedges, the white columns, all of it faded into the background as the desperation in her cry pierced the silence. And then, like fate had orchestrated the moment, a man in a sharp blue suit appeared, bouquet of roses in one hand, leather briefcase in the other. His polished shoes clicked against the pavement as he rushed forward, his face paling when he saw the little girl lying helplessly on the ground. He was no ordinary man. He was a millionaire, accustomed to power, wealth, and authority, but in that instant, none of that mattered. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat, and the flowers slipped slightly from his grip as his heart seemed to stop. Without hesitation, he dropped everything and shouted, his voice full of urgency and panic, the sound reverberating through the courtyard like a thunderclap. "Sparkling heart, before we dive deeper into this emotional journey, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of compassion to change lives, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel Kindness Glow. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world of the beauty of empathy." Sparkling heart. The woman in the red dress, standing a few steps behind, froze as well. She had been pushing an empty wheelchair, her expression torn between shock and anger, as though the little girl's fall had interrupted her carefully planned world. But for the man in the blue suit, everything else disappeared. He dropped to his knees beside the child, his hands hovering uncertainly as though he was afraid that even the gentlest touch might shatter her completely. He could see the raw fear in her tearful eyes, the trembling of her lips as she tried again to lift herself up, only to collapse back down in sobbing defeat. Her words repeated in his mind like a haunting refrain, "Mommy, I can't walk." He looked at her legs, small, fragile, covered in bruises as though life itself had been unkind to her. For a moment, he forgot who he was, the wealthy businessman who had built empires, the man who had controlled boardrooms with just a glance. In this instant, he was nothing but a human being faced with the unbearable suffering of a child. The story of how she had reached this point was far more painful than anyone could guess. Just weeks before, she had lost the only person who had ever truly loved her, her mother. A woman who had held her through storms, who had kissed away her tears, who had sung lullabies when the world outside grew too cruel. But death had stolen that light away too soon, leaving the little girl stranded in a home that was supposed to protect her but instead became a prison of indifference. Her stepmother wore red like a queen, her smile practiced, her words sharp as knives. And while the world believed the family was perfect, inside those grand white columns, the girl's cries were often silenced, her needs dismissed, her spirit dimmed. Every day, she carried her teddy bear as if it were her last piece of comfort, whispering to it in the dead of night, telling it secrets she no longer had anyone else to share with. Her stepmother had a wheelchair ready, not because the girl truly needed it, but because it was easier to control a child when she was confined, easier to remind her of weakness rather than strength. And so, on this day, when she stumbled and fell, her voice carried not just physical pain but the weight of months of brokenness, neglect, and aching loneliness. The millionaire could feel it all in that moment. He didn't know her story, not yet, but he knew pain when he saw it. He had once been a boy who cried alone too, a boy who had lost his parents and been left with relatives who saw him more as a burden than as family. His wealth, his success, his empire, all of it had been built as a way to prove to the world that he was more than the abandoned child he had once been. But here, staring at this sobbing little girl, it was as if he was looking into a mirror of his own past. The woman in red finally spoke, her voice sharp and dismissive, as though the girl's suffering was nothing but an inconvenience. But the millionaire didn't even glance at her. His focus remained on the child, his heart aching with a compassion he hadn't felt in years. Slowly, he reached out his hand and whispered her name softly, promising silently to himself that this moment would not be the end of her story, it would be the beginning of something new. The man's hand trembled as he gently brushed the hair from the little girl's tear-streaked face. Her sobs quieted for a moment, though the trembling of her body betrayed her fear. She clung to her teddy bear with one arm while trying to push herself off the ground with the other, but her strength gave out, and she collapsed again. He felt a sharp ache in his chest, the kind of ache no wealth, no luxury, no success could ever ease. It was the ache of helplessness, of watching innocence crushed beneath the weight of cruelty. Behind them, the woman in the red dress let out a dramatic sigh, her voice laced with irritation rather than concern. To her, the girl's cry wasn't a plea for help, it was an embarrassment, an inconvenience in front of important eyes. She muttered something about attention-seeking and drama, her hands gripping the wheelchair as though she wished to strap the girl into it and wheel her away, silencing her once again. But the man in the blue suit would not allow it. Not this time. He turned his gaze toward the woman, his eyes sharp, his jaw set, the commanding presence that had built empires now directed entirely at her. And in that silent clash, it became clear, her control over the girl was not as absolute as she believed. The girl's story began to unfold slowly, in fragments that escaped through her tears. She had once run freely across these very gardens, laughing as her mother cheered her on, the sound of joy ringing across the courtyard like bells. But since her mother's passing, laughter had been forbidden. Every stumble was punished, every tear dismissed. The wheelchair had appeared shortly after, not as a gift of compassion but as a tool of restraint. "You're weak," her stepmother had told her again and again until the words embedded themselves like thorns into the child's fragile heart. The millionaire listened, piecing together the truth from her sobs and the coldness of the woman who claimed to be her guardian. And as he listened, memories surged within him, memories of being told he was nothing, of being locked away while others lived freely, of crying out for help only to be met with silence. His fists clenched, not in anger at the girl, but at the cruelty of a world that dared to break children this way. In the days that followed, he began to visit more often. At first, it was under the guise of business, meetings with the girl's stepmother that justified his presence. But his true purpose was always her. He brought small gifts, a book with colorful pictures, a doll with golden hair, sometimes just fresh flowers to brighten her room. And slowly, he noticed the change in her eyes. Where once there had been only shadows, now there flickered a faint light, fragile yet undeniable. Still, her journey was not easy. Every attempt to stand on her own 2 feet ended in tears, her body trembling as though it had forgotten how to trust itself. Her stepmother mocked her efforts, sneering that she was wasting her time, that she belonged in the wheelchair forever. But the millionaire countered with patience and encouragement. He knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm, reminding her that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about rising again and again, no matter how many times life pushed you down. The courtyard became their secret training ground. Early in the mornings, before the household stirred, he would arrive to help her practice walking again. Sometimes she managed only a few shaky steps before collapsing, and each time, tears would sting her eyes. But he never let her feel alone. He picked her up, brushed the dust from her knees, and told her stories of his own struggles, of the nights he had cried himself to sleep and the mornings he had risen determined to fight once more. She listened with wide eyes, clinging to his words as though they were lifelines. One morning, after weeks of effort, she managed to take 5 steps on her own. Her face lit up with joy, her tears turning to laughter as she stumbled into his arms. For the first time since her mother's passing, the sound of her giggle echoed across the courtyard, carrying with it a hope that had long been buried. The millionaire felt his own eyes sting, his heart swelling with pride as he realized that this child, who had been told she could never rise, was now proving them all wrong. But the stepmother's anger grew with each passing day. The more the girl found strength, the more she lost control. And so, one evening, she cornered the girl in her room, her voice venomous as she hissed that no one could love her, that the millionaire's kindness was temporary, that she was doomed to remain a burden. The girl cried herself to sleep that night, clutching her teddy bear tighter than ever, the cruel words echoing in her mind. The millionaire sensed the change the next morning when he arrived. She sat silently in her chair, refusing to meet his gaze, her shoulders hunched as though carrying an invisible weight. He knelt beside her once again, lifting her chin gently with his hand, his eyes filled with compassion. He reminded her of the steps she had taken, the laughter she had shared, the strength she had already proven. And slowly, her tears returned, not of despair this time, but of release, of finally realizing that someone truly believed in her. It was in that moment, as the sun painted the courtyard in golden light, that he made a silent vow. He would not let her fade into the shadows of neglect. He would not allow her to grow up believing she was weak or unworthy of love. He would fight for her, no matter what it took. For in her, he saw not just a reflection of his past, but the promise of a brighter future, a future where kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. The day of truth arrived on an afternoon heavy with tension. The courtyard, once filled with the sound of laughter and sobs, now stood silent beneath the towering white columns. The millionaire walked in with steady steps, his sharp suit immaculate, but his heart weighed with resolve. Today, he wasn't here just to comfort. Today, he was here to fight. The little girl sat near the fountain, her teddy bear on her lap, her small fingers tracing its fur as though seeking courage from the familiar touch. She looked up when she saw him, her eyes uncertain, carrying both hope and fear. He gave her a reassuring nod, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. The woman in the red dress soon appeared, her expression one of annoyance and arrogance. She had grown tired of his visits, tired of his interference. To her, kindness was weakness, and the sight of him nurturing the girl ignited her fury. She mocked him openly, calling his presence unnecessary, accusing him of filling the child's head with false hope. "She'll never walk again," she hissed. "She'll always be broken. The sooner she accepts that, the better." But the millionaire's voice cut through her venom like steel. Calm but unshakable, he declared that no child was ever broken beyond repair, that love and belief could rebuild what cruelty tried to destroy. His words carried not just conviction but lived truth, the echo of his own journey from despair to strength. The stepmother faltered, caught off guard by the fire in his tone, but her pride held her tongue sharp. And then, something miraculous happened. The little girl, who had been silent until now, slowly rose from where she sat. Her legs trembled, her knees wobbled, but her spirit carried her upward. With her teddy bear still clutched in one hand, she took a single step forward. Then another. And another. The silence of the courtyard broke with the sound of her small feet against the stone. Her face contorted with effort, but her eyes burned with determination. The millionaire rushed to her side, his hands ready to catch her if she fell, but she shook her head fiercely, insisting she do it herself. Each step was a battle, each movement a declaration that she was not what her stepmother called her. And finally, she reached him, stumbling into his arms, not out of weakness but out of victory. Tears filled his eyes as he held her tightly, his voice breaking as he whispered how proud he was of her. Around them, the air seemed to shift, the weight of despair lifting as hope blossomed in its place. The stepmother's face drained of color, her control slipping through her fingers like sand. For the first time, it wasn't her words that defined the child, it was her own strength, her own courage, her own triumph. In the days that followed, change swept through the mansion. The millionaire, true to his vow, took steps to ensure the girl was safe, loved, and free from the grip of cruelty. Legal battles were fought, guardianship contested, but he never wavered. And through it all, the little girl walked more and more each day, her laughter returning, her smile brighter than the sun. One evening, as the golden light of dusk bathed the courtyard, she ran, truly ran, for the first time in months. Her teddy bear bounced in her arms, her hair streamed behind her, and her laughter rang like bells. The millionaire stood watching, his heart swelling with emotions too vast for words. She was no longer the girl who cried, "I can't walk." She was the girl who proved she could rise, who turned her pain into power, who taught even a wealthy man that the greatest treasures in life were not found in empires or riches, but in the healing of a child's heart. Sparkling heart, if this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Glow. Every engagement helps us spread more stories of hope, resilience, and the life-changing power of kindness. Sparkling heart. And before we end, Sparkles, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below, do you believe kindness can truly heal broken hearts? Your words might inspire someone who needs hope today. As the camera of life panned away from the grand mansion, the final image remained, a little girl running freely once again, her teddy bear held tight, her laughter echoing across the sky, and a man who once dropped everything to help her, now forever changed by the simple, profound truth that kindness can transform even the darkest moments into light.